What's the role of production in classical music? A field we normally think of as having fairly tame production values. To get an idea about that, let's drop into a Mercury Soul classical club show at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. On this event, produced by the Kennedy Center's KC Jukebox series, we have Maestro Benjamin Schwartz conducting a piece on the stage. Suddenly behind them appears another ensemble. Now we've got a string quartet grooving with the original ensemble, two different stages happening at the same time, now with the projected program information tracking to that. Stagecraft, lighting, ambient information, these are three things that can greatly enhance the classical music experience. And in a word, they're production. Production is the second part of this mini series exploring curating, the ways we experience classical music in new ways. And that doesn't mean you have to present everything in a club. Here's a more traditional concert, still presented in a different kind of way. We've got the music of Nathaniel Stuckey being played by percussion. The audience is sitting in the round, and we've got projected program information mixing with design elements, kind of filtering above the audience. It doesn't have to be a very elaborate concert hall for you to change the way people experience classical music. Let's go to the three different components of production and start with lighting. Lighting is a key component in the way we experience classical music, and I advocate for a very simple approach. Make it darker, make it more surreal, make it more magical like in a theater. We don't always have to experience all of our concerts with a half-lit audience and a brightly lit stage. Here's a solo pianist on the Chicago Symphony's Music Now series playing on the vast stage of the Harris Theater. We decided to use a small pool of light to illuminate the pianist and just have some colorful textures on the wall and on the screen above him. You can contrast that with this larger ensemble, which appears to be swallowed by the stage because so much of the stage is overlit. Color is also a key component. In classical music, we have so many set changes with lots of different instruments that the use of color between pieces or even between movements is a great way to guide the listener and to let them focus on what they're supposed to hear and not on the instruments hiding in the back. Mercury Soul actually presented an entire show based around color called Prismatic, where Scriabin's light organ was recreated as a centerpiece of the show, but you don't have to go crazy like that to use a little bit of uplights to make a string quartet look better. Here's a less successful use of lighting. You can't even see the string quartet on this Mercury Soul show because we didn't have any uplights. So uplights are a very useful, fairly cheap way to get light on your players. Stagecraft is often overlooked in classical music, but we can look to theatrical stagecraft as a way to bring musicians closer to the audience and to make the experience more vivid. You don't have to have multiple stages to do interesting things with stagecraft. Here's a CSO Music Now concert that has Hubbard Street Dance appearing behind the string quartet. But you don't have to have a dance ensemble waiting in the wings to do something imaginative with stagecraft. And it always starts with the plot. Your stage plot should have as much of the show presentable as possible, differentiated by lighting pools. Every single classical concert should have the same attention to detail in terms of stagecraft that a theatrical event does. Let's look more closely at the California Mystics KC Jukebox show that I presented at the Kennedy Center. Here's the stage plot. You can see that we're doing this in a kind of vast, long space. This is the atrium on the top of the Kennedy Center. As the audience enters from the far right, there's a percussion ensemble immediately greeting them when they enter the main space. In the middle of the main space is Nathaniel Stuckey's Junkestra, a percussion ensemble made up of junk instruments. And on the far end is an organ and ultimately a choir. This stage plot allowed the audience to migrate through the space freely, to come up close to the instruments, to see the ensembles before they were playing, and ultimately to experience the whole concert in a much smoother way than if we put all those ensembles on the same stage at the same time. But there's a key component to that. If you're going to have the audience moving around in different stages, you really need to have ambient information. The program book is a very 19th century model. We need to look at new ways of getting information to audiences. And the reason is that it's a barrier to entry. I've been looking at ways to get information to audiences in a very approachable way, where they can just look at a wall, look over their shoulder, or between pieces when a piano is being dragged out, we get a video interview with the composer.
I'm John Luther Adams.
There are a couple of different approaches. One is to have static imagery and text projected on a wall or a screen. The other is to have something a little bit more cinematic, have some animation, have videos of the performers or the composer speaking. You'll hear 3 pieces tonight that all take this idea of new forms animated by new sounds. But before you do that, you need to answer the question, where's the screen? I think we've all been to concerts where there's a giant screen right behind the stage. Looks a little bit like a drive-in movie. We want the focus to be on the musicians. We want the information to be kind of framing what they do, but not distracting from that. So, how do you do it? First thing you do is you create a script. That involves editing down the program information into its most basic essence. Once you have that content, then you need to work with a projectionist or a video designer, or maybe it's something you can do yourself. What's important to remember is that you need to add design elements that have something to do with the program. In this case, many of the pieces had an electronic component, and so we called the show Synesthesia, since many of them had synthetic electronic elements. Ambient information is something you'll find on any concert that I'm curating, whether it be the Kennedy Center's Casey Jukebox series, or Chicago Symphony's Music Now, or my own Mercury Soul. I think ambient information is a great way to lower the barriers to entry, to create a lot of information that can be easily digested, and also to give the show a kind of a design element at the same time. When the performers are actually playing, you really want to have your projections, your lighting, your stagecraft, all kind of quiet down so that people can focus on what they came to see, which is the musicians on the stage. Tune in next time for Platform, where we talk about the entire concert experience from the moment you walk in to the moment you leave.